The Subcommittee on Africa will come to order. The purpose of this hearing is to explore the developments following the historic signing of the Washington Accords between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. My engagement in supporting peace between Rwanda and DRC spans more than 3 decades, from a focus on the immediate aftermath of the 1994 Rwandan genocide. We even had hearings here with people because, unfortunately, the international community utterly failed, especially Kofi Annan, who was the head of security. He got the General Dallaire memo about what was about to happen in Rwanda, and nothing was done, and we had people testify on that. So it's been a long-standing concern. It's been bipartisan, so I'm happy that we're having this hearing today. We are working, of course, on trying to see faithful implementation of the Washington Accords for peace and prosperity. This skillfully and brilliantly brokered peace deal signified a new era in the region, one where peace through strength is brought to bear to end the lengthy, bloody, and costly conflict. Bringing both parties to negotiate at the same table was historic in and of itself. The first time in modern history where such progress has been made on this conflict. The deals agreed to will secure extraordinary benefits, if faithfully implemented, for the DRC, for Rwanda, and for the United States. Ensuring that all sides follow through on the commitments made at the signing in December is not only in the U.S. national interest, but most importantly, really, for the millions of people who suffer in the war, for future generations of Congolese and Rwandan children, and for the memory of the 6 million dead from this decades-long conflict, a human toll that is both staggering and intolerable. Over the course of the last several years, I've chaired 11 hearings that have focused exclusively on the political crisis and violence in the DRC and Rwanda. Regrettably, each hearing has revealed that the international community and the U.S. response has been half-hearted and perhaps even indifferent, especially in the face of such violence, tragedy, and suffering. Today, things are changing. And under President Trump and his cabinet's leadership in the response is strong, sustained, and I believe it will be durable. I believe that the signing of the Washington Accords in such a public way, just down a few blocks, and I was there for that, along with Chairman Mast and others, it brings gravity to the commitments of the leaders of the DRC and Rwanda. And this hearing today is a message about the seriousness this committee, this full committee, of course, there's great care there, and of course, and the full Congress, House and Senate, to those commitments. We're committed. We want faithful implementation. It's an appeal to both sides. Please, faithfully implement this deal. In December of last year, I said I look forward to working on and watching the peace process unfold and ensure that the leaders of the DRC and Rwanda are honoring the terms of the agreement. That is why we've called this hearing today, because there continue to be spoilers to the peace process, belligerents who act to undermine and embarrass the United States, and I would say, even more importantly, themselves. You know, if you sign, you say, this is I put my honor and my full faith towards this agreement, you gotta follow through. The benefits of the Washington Accords, as I said before, are just extraordinary, and everyone wins when this is implemented faithfully. The incentives are spelled out clearly in the Regional Economic Integration Framework, mandated that the DRC and Rwanda develop a structured roadmap for economic integration, covering mineral supply chains, infrastructure, energy, tourism, and other sectors, to underpin peace with shared prosperity and to attract investment. Whereas the Strategic Partnership Agreement between the U.S. and each of the African governments, DRC and separately Rwanda, builds on the Regional Economic Integration Framework into a wider trilateral framework that links economic reforms, critical minerals governance, and security cooperation to the U.S. strategic interests and investment commitments. This includes addressing child and forced labor issues in the mining industry through the full supply chain transparency, quote unquote, due to the diligence, traceability, and adherence to internationally recognized standards to ensure responsible mining and sourcing, close quote. Very critical is that the Washington Accords include a 4-phase concept of operations that both parties agreed to, and that is essential for Rwanda agreeing to pull its troops back, but only if the DRC follows a synchronized schedule to eliminate the FDLR militia. At a hearing of this subcommittee on May 5th of 1998, I noted that, quote, the RPF-led Rwandan government has used the guilt of the international community as a shield to prevent criticism of its actions in the DRC, and that the sheltering of the Hutu participants in the genocide has led to continuing problems in that country. Decades later, the root causes of the conflict continued to boil over. The presence of the FDLR and its genocidal ideology rightfully continues to be the government of Rwanda's primary national security concern in eastern Congo. But today, we have good reason to believe that known areas of the FDLR combatants are under M23 and Rwandan control. And I would expect to hear the developments that describe the measures being taken by M23 in Rwanda to demobilize these actors. It is insufficient to say that M23 is an independent group or not party to the Washington Accords when there is a clear pattern of coordination by Kigali and the group. The Congolese army, too, has issues with the FDLR, including there's no clear-cut policy that relocates and disarms individuals who should be viewed as a threat to the Congolese commitments. In 2008, I visited Goma. Then the peacekeepers, unfortunately, were engaging in despicable behavior of raping little children. Ambassador Swing was in charge of that deployment. I held 4 hearings on it. We thought we got an agreement, a blue helmet policy that said zero tolerance. It was very, very slow in the implementation. And when the peacekeepers don't protect, who's left? And I was very, very upset with that, as were so many others on both sides of the aisle. The leaders, so Senator Rubio has been very specific, and I am grateful for this, about Hong Kong and mainland China's based companies accused of financing armed groups, including M23. These sanctions that have been imposed by the Trump administration include Congo Dongyang Mining Corporation, which is a facilitator accused of sourcing minerals from conflict zones and moving them through Rwandan supply chains to Chinese refineries. In 2023, I chaired a hearing and said, from cobalt to cars, the entire supply chain is built on violence. And we heard from several people who talked about how children were dying, who are working in artisanal mines, and others. They were forced. Chinese government I have a bill in that would try to stop it. It has not passed. Part of it passed on the, over on the, what do you call it, the Ways and Means Committee, but it still has not proceeded. Hopefully what's happening now eclipses any need for anything like that, because this agreement is so comprehensive. We must break our dependence on minerals from that finance the Chinese Communist Party, as I said back in 2023, and that fuels the stability proffered by the CCP. The Washington Accords are more than minerals. It's a culminating event designed to end the suffering in the war. And I asked in December of 2012, can the inter-ethnic problems in the DRC and its neighbors finally be resolved so that a lasting peace can be achieved?
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Jacobs, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the United States' efforts to advance peace between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, culminating in the signing of the Washington Accords on December 4th, 2025. As a former staffer of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I just want to say that I'm especially honored to be at this table today. For more than 3 decades, the Eastern DRC has been plagued by conflict, instability, and human suffering. The region's challenges have defied easy solutions, with cycles of violence undermining development and threatening the security of millions. The United States has long recognized the strategic importance of the Great Lakes region, both for our own interests and for the well-being of the region's people. On December 4th, at the Donald J. Trump Institute for Peace, President Tshisekedi and President Kagame signed the Washington Accords, a historic step forward that marks the most meaningful advance toward resolving this conflict in decades. This achievement is a testament to the power of sustained high-level diplomacy and the importance of American leadership on the world stage. President Trump is the peace president, and the landmark breakthrough achieved by the Washington Accords would not have been possible without his leadership. His direct engagement, vision, and determination to see this conflict resolved were instrumental in bringing the parties to the table and sustaining momentum throughout the process. I also recognize the leadership of Secretary Rubio and Senior Advisor Masad Boulos, whose tireless efforts were critical in forging consensus and guiding the negotiations to a successful conclusion. The benefits of the Washington Accords are profound. For the people of the DRC and of Rwanda, the Accords offer a pathway for lasting peace, improved security, and the opportunity to rebuild communities devastated by decades of violence. For the United States, President Trump designed the Accords to advance American interests in regional stability and promote economic growth that benefits both Americans and the region. As a key component of the America First foreign policy objectives of this administration, the Accords deliver direct, concrete benefits to the American people. By stabilizing a region that is a major source of critical minerals, including cobalt and coltan, which are essential for the U.S. manufacturing and defense sectors, the Accords help secure American supply chains and reduce our reliance on competitors like China. The Strategic Partnership Agreement with the DRC is a first-of-its-kind, legally binding agreement that creates the conditions for significant U.S. investment into the DRC in critical minerals and key strategic infrastructure, and lays out the path forward for U.S.-DRC cooperation on the Sakania-Lobito corridor. A more stable Great Lakes region means less need for costly U.S. humanitarian interventions and peacekeeping missions, allowing us to focus taxpayer resources on priorities at home while upholding U.S. global leadership and securing supply chains. For the region, the Washington Accords represent a new chapter. The Accords establish clear commitments from both sides to respect territorial integrity, cease support for armed groups, and cooperate on border security and economic development. The Accords also envision a robust framework for monitoring and implementation, with the United States, Qatar, and the African Union working together to play a central role in future mediation and oversight. We know that peace is fragile, and our work does not end with the signing of the Accords. As we move forward, our focus remains on the difficult work of implementation. We are working closely with our partners in the African Union, the United Nations, Qatar, and other regional and international stakeholders to ensure that commitments are translated into concrete action on the ground. This includes supporting the Qatari-led talks between the DRC and the M23 armed group, strengthening the AU's mediation architecture, and mobilizing resources for post-conflict recovery while burden sharing with partners. We will ensure that the promises made in Washington are kept, that the peace process delivers real results so that the people of the region see tangible improvements in their lives, and that the conditions for increased U.S. investment are realized. Transparency and accountability are central at every stage, and those who threaten peace will be held responsible. As Secretary Rubio said, we will take action to ensure promises made to the President are kept. In closing, I want to thank the subcommittee for its attention to this critical issue and for its support of our efforts in the Great Lakes region. The Washington Accords are a historic achievement, but they are also a call to action. With continued leadership and partnership, we can help build a future of peace and prosperity for the DRC, Rwanda, and the United States. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Very much for your testimony, but more importantly for your leadership on a day-to-day level on this critical issue. MONUSCO has been reauthorized at 11,000 troops and personnel. And, you know, when I have visited with those troops in the past, especially when, unfortunately, there were from significant allegations being made against them, I got the sense that how often do they leave the barracks to actually try to mitigate the hostilities? And I'm wondering if you know, you have some thoughts on how they could be more effective. Are they effective now? It seems like there's still blood. I was just amazed by how they have hope. See more coming in, but because of the love that we've shown to them. So a lot of faith-based concern, obviously, for advocates for those victims, and wondering what we could be doing further to assist them. But in terms of the agreement, and I said that we did both, there will be, we need to be ramp up or just say, look, we're not kidding. Going on in a very, very real way. I remember visiting a Christian health facility in DR Congo, near Goma, where many women who had been horrifically gang raped as a tool of terrorism, broken lives, were actually getting their lives back through faith and a great deal of health care and the like at that facility. And I was just amazed by how they had hope again, because you know, I could see some of the women who were coming in had no hope, but because of the love that was being shown to them. There's a lot of faith-based concern, obviously, for and other concern for those victims, and I'm wondering what we could be doing further to assist them. But in terms of the agreement, and I said it a moment ago, I do hope that there will be, I mean, there needs to be, you could ramp up or just say, look, we're not kidding. I think anybody can question the president's faithfulness on this. He really wants this. You all did unbelievably good, hard work in devising all of these interlocking strategies. That's real commitment, and that's real hard work, and you've done it. And you know, when one or both or some of the parties don't respect that, you shouldn't blame the person who convened them and brought everybody into that multiple rooms, multiple times, to try to hatch out a deal. So but I do hope that there will be a real hard hit on those who are fomenting the end of this agreement by allowing M23, for example, to commit the atrocities that they're committed. I'm wondering too, if I could ask, just jot it down, is the AU playing a robust role in this? You know, they do have great diplomatic capabilities, and again, the UN has its presence there in a number of ways, including with peacekeepers, and I just hope that they're doing their job to protect innocent civilians.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for those questions. To start with addressing MONUSCO,
Yes.
we do assess that MONUSCO is currently the only force deployed in Eastern DRC that has the capacity to support these agreements that we have signed. So we are looking to MONUSCO to provide logistical support to the ceasefire monitoring mechanism that we are standing up in coordination with the International Conference of the Great Lakes region with their mechanism. So we are discussing how MONUSCO can be more helpful in holding up the accords specifically, and also the Doha Framework Agreement. In the most recent mandate renewal, we were pleased to see language in MONUSCO's mandate that explicitly allows them to support these agreements. And Secretary Rubio did fund MONUSCO in the most recent funding obligation. So the U.S. does remain committed to supporting MONUSCO and to allowing it to play a more effective role in Eastern DRC. With that said, we do see significant obstruction to MONUSCO's capabilities. We see M23 obstructing MONUSCO's movements and capability to protect civilians. So that's something we continue to push on. We, of course, would like to see MONUSCO be more effective, especially in the protection of civilians. So we will continue to discuss the force's role. In terms of implementing the accords, as you mentioned, we fully intend to hold accountable any spoilers to the peace process. We, of course, appreciated President Trump's personal involvement in the December 4th signing of the accords. The president is rightly proud of the progress that we have made under his leadership over the past year in bringing an end to this conflict. And with that recognized, we know that peace is complicated, and Secretary Rubio immediately after the signing said, we have an agreement, and now the agreement has to be lived up to. So really putting the onus on the parties, as you said, to uphold their commitments. And he also said that, like any conflict, there are going to be ups and downs in that implementation, but he made it clear, and I also want to make clear today, that we will stay the course, and the U.S. remains absolutely committed to moving forward under the framework of the Washington Accords as the best way to resolve this conflict. We do intend to keep all options on the table to hold spoilers accountable. I also want to be clear that since December 4th, unfortunately, we have seen violence in eastern DRC intensify. We saw M23 with support from the Rwandan Defense Forces that has been documented and stated by Ambassador Waltz, most recently at USUN. We saw this offensive take the strategically important town of Uvira, and that's extremely concerning to us. And we do consider that even though we have seen a measure of withdrawal from Uvira, I want to be clear that that movement is not enough. We have made it very clear that a more clear withdrawal further north, with Rwandan troops heading back toward Rwanda's borders, with M23 pulling back much farther to at least their previous lines and recommitting to their engagement in the Doha process. We really need to see these steps, and any measures we take to address them will be calibrated to change behavior. So we do have all options on the table, and at the highest level continue to discuss what measures we will implement to change the behavior that we're seeing. Finally, on the African Union's role, we are very appreciative of the AU, especially the AU Commission chairperson and his team. They have been very excellent in supporting both the Doha track and the Washington Accords implementation mechanisms. We do have AU representation in our Joint Oversight Committee and Joint Security Coordination Committee or mechanism meetings. The JOC and JSCM are the main accountability mechanisms through which we oversee the Washington track, and the AU is present there and very active, and we appreciate their input. The president of Togo is also designated as the AU mediator for this conflict. We appreciate the conference that he convened actually last weekend in Togo. The U.S. was able to participate, as were many others, and in that conference, a do-out that we had hoped to see, and which we believe we did see, was the operationalization of the 5 former heads of state that the AU has designated to help with certain tracks of this process. And one of those tracks is civil society engagement. So completely agree with what we're hearing, that civil society engagement is key to a lasting peace, and we're really hoping that the AU can step up and play a leading role in that respect.
Before yielding to the ranking member, we have an obligation to do things too in the House and the Senate. We thank you for what you are doing. I know it's got to be terribly distressing to see all the hard work being put at risk. I'm thinking, Global Magnitsky Act, guess who pushed it? Me. It came from the original Belarus Democracy Act, which I did in 2004, when all these people said, oh, don't do that, don't sanction Lukashenko. Well, we did. That law was signed by George W. Bush in 2004, and we got a lot of prisoners out, and we said, we're not kidding. You're not going to be able to do business here. And that's the underpinning of the entire Global Magnitsky Act. It came from the Belarus Democracy Act. And I will look to do specific country-specific legislation to help the president get adherence to, and these countries, because he's already doing it, to what they've agreed to. And again, I can't say it enough. When you sign something, you put your honor on the line, and then you do nothing, or you wink and nod and you allow certain things to happen. I'm talking about individual players in the two countries, particularly M23. We have to get more involved too as a Congress, and I plan to lead it. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dash Troutman, thank you again. While I appreciate President Trump's attention to this war, I think there is a long way to go before peace is actually realized in Eastern Congo. Even after the signing of the Washington Accords last month, the M23 and Rwanda Defense Forces took over Uvira in its third new offensive in the Kivus in 2025. So while I was glad to see Secretary Rubio's and Ambassador Waltz's tough messages towards Rwanda, including that they will use tools at their disposal to hold Rwanda accountable, we have yet to see any of those tools deployed nearly a month later. What punitive measures, including sanctions, is the U.S. prepared to take against Rwanda and the M23 to force their full retreat? Rdc-Rwanda forces have moved into Uvira. How is the U.S. engaging with the Congolese government to ensure a return of civil administration to the Rwanda? Thank you for the attention to the situation. We have some of the largest state forces who have been first and foremost, we message that if there's a completion of that we don't have a timeline yet on when we'll get to the civil administration. Since we're still in the situation, right? And that my topics is just even more important reductions and resolutions against the one in Uvira, one of them, and other unidentified armed elements. Steps the U.S. taking to mitigate civilian protection risks to recognize the conflict-affected communities in and around Uvira. Thank you for that question. We are in very engaged with the DRC on the importance of these civilians and specific chance of communication with the Muslim and this is a good time to also recognize access issue, unfortunately. And that really has to reporting rate to get on the situation on the ground to right. I'm looking now to make more to civil society. I appreciate that you acknowledge how important they are. I'm glad to hear that the plans to have the AE to do some consultations, but what is your response to criticism from Congolese opposition and civil society leaders, including Nobel laureate Rdc that the U.S. peace process is effectively rewarded Rwanda with pledges of U.S. investment for attacking DRC? So we do continue to our currency level. I'm just going to make sure session is framework. And we do well, I think most of the society I've spoken to would disagree with the assessment that they have been engaged in this process. So I would urge you to define that situation because the Congolese have, been privy to 3 decades of failed peace agreements, and I think those civil society groups on the ground know what's needed to happen. With that, Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing today, and thank you, our witness, for being here. Appreciate your testimony. I've had the privilege of visiting the African continent with multiple congressional delegations since the Congress was not here, including recently DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, in the area. During these visits, nearly all my conversations were centered around security and economic growth. And thanks to the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Rubio, that's exactly what the Washington Accord peace and prosperity sets the foundation for this to take place in the DRC. Now that the agreement is signed, implementation must be executed thoughtfully and with buy-in from all regional partners. key to lasting peace is economic security, right? But you can't have economic security until you have some level of physical security as well. Because people, outside nations are not going to come in and invest in an area where it's too hostile and too dangerous to operate. So that's just really going to be key in all of this. A plan that I've discussed with multiple heads of state in the area, including Rwanda and DRC, is that the region can create an economic framework where neighboring countries would manage separate segments of the critical mineral supply chain coming from the eastern DRC. Now, I'm not suggesting that the DRC should give resources away that belong to the DRC, but what I am suggesting is that if this becomes a situation where it's mutually beneficial for everyone to have peace in the region because it's financially beneficial for everyone to have peace in the region, then I think that goes a long ways for establishing lasting peace. And I proposed multiple times that there should be agreement between the countries, and not just Rwanda and the DRC, but the DRC and Burundi, the DRC and Uganda, some of their neighbors, that everyone benefits from the trillions, the tens of trillions of dollars of rare earths that are currently in the eastern DRC. It's one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, in the world with regards to some of these natural resources. So, at least keep in mind, in the DRC and then refined or processed in the neighboring countries, everyone would have a vested interest in making sure that peace is maintained in the area. I also think that another area that's big here is that in order to get the physical security we talked about, well, first off, let me just say that once that happens, another area that's just really strongly is that the resources that come from this agreement down the road, if this were to take place, if some of this tremendous wealth were realized by the DRC and its neighboring countries, as I described, I think that it's absolutely critical that these resources have to be reinvested in the people of the DRC, the infrastructure. They have to see their lives getting better based on these minerals, being processed and sold. I also think that it's going to be really key. We talked about the atrocities. Yes, there's been atrocities on both sides. I read the intel. In 23 was Rwanda. There's been some atrocities across the board. It's been going on for a long time anyway. But I also maintain that E23 is an art militia group. I don't think they're going to put their weapons down and start farming the next day. I think that there has to be a concerted effort by the DRC to take the Congolese members of N23 and incorporate them into the broader security platform for the country. Whether that's, to be part of the military in some way, I'm not sure, but I do think that you have to have a commitment to that as well. But my question for you, real quick, so I'm going to mention how left, sorry, but is what is the Department of State doing right now to how are they working to implement such a framework that I was just described with regards to the economic and the physical security?
Right, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to address that. The regional framework that you described is exactly in line with what the regional economic integration framework signed between the DRC. So that was the big incentive, which is this process that you said, economic security and people who have interest in customers who have to do partners. So we are looking forward to having with the integration framework, which needs to strengthen the process of integration quality centers like minerals, so we look forward to the implementation of that framework, especially with stability. And I do appreciate that added on it for me or legitimate concern. I think we are certainly going to get investigation that is to benefit from this. I just I guess we need to make that actually create a situation for that another critical aspect of and so we discuss negotiations so we are discussions and the US going to be right so make this perception of
appreciate that. And I know this, it sounds a lot easier than it actually is. It's been this way on for decades now, this conflict. But I do think that at some point we're have to set aside differences, and there has to be a way for each 23 to reintegrate and for everyone, including both sides of this conflict, to see that they're benefiting from what's going on with the vast communal welfare that I think is ultimately the solution to this problem. But once again, I thank you for your time and that, Mr. Chairman. Your recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. For decades, the Democratic Party is not over your speed. The attraction of the highest speed of the actors.
Thank you.
Right, for the rules and former actors. Waiting almost 15 million people in the DRC using humanitarian assistance. And almost 27 million people with the crisis of the worst levels. Food insecurity in 2026. In December, Congress President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwanda President Paul Kagame officially signed the U.S. brokered peace agreement and economic framework. Sustainability of this agreement is questionable given that it prioritizes economic benefits on extraction of critical material minerals over building sustainable peace. It excluded key actors impacted by the conflict, especially local civil society and Congolese women and girls did not get involved in the influential destabilizing active parties to the conflict, since the March 23rd movement in 2023. Over the last year, the administration terminated conflict and atrocity prevention and resolution programs in the country that advanced livelihoods and promoted stability around critical minerals, which has in turn undermined stability and threatened the success of the U.S.-led peace efforts. Bringing on the organization of the State Department resulted in the elimination of key offices focused on conflict and atrocity prevention, such as the Bureau of Conflict and Stabilization Operation, BSO, and the Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues. To successfully and sustainably address the drivers of violence and instability in the DRC, Trump administration must support programs and incorporate diverse local stakeholders, strengthen capacity to prevent and resolve conflict, respond to atrocities, tackle disproportionate impact, long-range conflict, as living rules. On another note, I'd like to add the Trump administration is wrong for eliminating programs that have to deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is the only way to help resolve issues of conflict, as well as about racial justice, as well as promote women to inclusive leadership positions. I would ask you, to what extent has the African Bureau implemented conflict prevention and peace building programs in the country to complement recent diplomacy surrounding DRC?
I would note that we do have many companies systems to the United States. I think that we continue to programs, including those who offer and services to girls and
Is there a particular reason why the U.S. peace plan is not inclusive as civil society, including women-led civil society, not included in official talks?
It's much better to us. So we did appreciate working those conversations. And you're looking to into those things that we and brings this to
Women that we speak include, I find it rather curious that the president of the United States puts more bans on the African countries, more bans on which really effort to the global economy, making more barriers between our great countries to participate. Thanks so much for your participation. I hear that. Mr. Olszewski.
Thank you to Chair Smith, Ranking Member Jacobs, to our witness for being here. Just a little bit of context for Congolese civilians living in the DRC. The real test for Washington courts is pretty scary. It's not whether the president declares there's peace. It's does life become safer, more dignified, more economically secure communities. Today, more than 70% of Congolese civilians live in extreme poverty. More than 1,100 schools and learning sites have been damaged or turned into shelters. Over 1.6 million children out of school in all of the DRC. Nearly 25 million are facing time levels of food insecurity. And since December 1st, at least 500,000 people, including over 100,000 children, have been newly displaced within South people. So I just want to echo, I guess, the questions and the concerns, because despite the staggering numbers, we continue to hear from Congolese civil society leaders that they decide on in the negotiations. So it's not a specific question, but hopefully as a follow-up, I'd love to learn more about specifically. You say that they're being engaged. I want to hear specifically as a follow-up how that engagement is happening and what the plans are to continue. But I appreciate your commitment to that. I have a couple of questions I do want to get to while we're here today. And really grounded in the belief that policy should be grounded in the lived realities, the priorities, and leadership of the Congolese communities themselves. Without it, we are repeating the same top-down approach that's failed Congolese people for 3 decades, no matter how strong the diplomatics or looks like here in Washington. So my first question today is actually building on the open line question. We know that the strategic partnership agreement includes a few requirements for global processing, environmental standards, and revenue share. I'm curious how the State Department will work to ensure that the wealth generated and produced by these resources for U.S. firms will actually help drive local economic.
So I was going to address this question. We do consider decision that the USDRC strategic partnership is a big. It's possible to be working very closely in our nation. To develop this and we are very excited about the issue of this. We do believe that under the bill, access to this DRC and this transfer of one based on the standards for which will help with the skills transfer operation and develop more opportunities across the university. Action plans. Even also includes from the DRC to regulate wise lines for that local formalized inspection on that discrimination and also workers and the DRC benefit from their transfer their resources.
So we all plan to engage in those conversations as they're producing that regulation. And the second meeting on child workers, we need to use that reports that the recruitment and use of children by armed groups has increased by 60% since 2024 compared to the previous year. Additionally, the control of passengers by armed groups through to the eastern provinces of the DRC is entrenched in instability, exacerbating suffering and civilians. I'm curious how the U.S. government is supporting both country-led and partner efforts, including agencies such as this STEM recruitment of children, who would perpetuate this conflict and ensure even greater opportunity for those children. What active awards does the department have in the DRC to work to address the needs of these small children?
Just not the chance to address that issue. So I was able to raise the issue of child soldiers and regulations, which can be so, and I need to be, I don't think it's there's some we've been here, I hear particularly to follow state investigations and just sort of shots. That's great. Absolutely. And it just would have to be 2 or 6 minutes, but we should have to work. The rest of the children and all the things has to be shared that.
It's great. Look forward to that. And thank you for your time. That's Germany.
Like we were wearing this, who is Jeffers?
Things to share and so business. Shall we for being here today to answer our questions? My constituents have vocalized their desire to do more report to that, especially in most business. So it's the thing that came to the notion that we're excited about opportunities. What is the global trade gateway? Once a major force in logistic hubs and increasingly connected with numerous markets that have stability between the DRC and the modern Benjamin is prepared to provide responsible money, so material sourcing, and expand the two-way trade efforts in American workers and businesses. As Congress looks at Washington, it's important to assess how you engage and reinforce African American peace methods while also supporting economic integration and long-term regional stability. How is the United States working with Rwanda and DRC to advance cross-border trade, infrastructure, and material supply chains in ways that support peace and measurable economic benefits? Thank you so much for asking me questions. The U.S. stands ready to help diversity and
This is an important hearing. I used to work on that house inside my mouth. I know the check. Very earnest guy, very. New work. The one. She's from California. Down Southern California. Yeah. Okay. I knew, I was on the second side, so I didn't get to know it was a reasonable house. I guess, well, the guy on the farm, President Trump stopped. I think that's it. Yeah. It's awesome. If you deal with African affairs,
Sure, so we're very grateful for the African communities and the efficiency of the we were very grateful for their services and just to show off for their agreement. They took their support the AU has competition with 5 full to do their process. So I mentioned this community with the application process. I love the reason. So certainly like to see. So my next question, because we're extremely successful. Since you've been work with the city are successful, we also have businesses that take action. So what do you need to accomplish to begin this gap of success? Thank you very much for this. I was thinking about it before I started this and I'm certain problem and especially asking to being able to say so you know, you know, that we just need to see we got great weather. It was very nice also. You know, it comes lots of customers, a lot of the Western business people on it. So then we can do your policy. Move this issue forward. Thank you so much.
Just follow-up questions. Yes, questions. I've read both of the statements that have been submitted by the respective countries. It's very, very. The most put out from the outset of the DRC. Congo extends its deep thanks to the United States of America and President Donald Trump for facilitating the 75th Peace and Prosperity Agreement. For the first time in history, they write, a U.S. president has taken personal interest in ending one-back pressure for the war issue of DRC. That objection to that statement, we have part of the record in the abundance with the religion that's great, right? Rwanda is something around gratitude to President Trump and his administration for prioritizing the Rwanda's peace process. That it comes out, the accords represent serious progress towards security, prosperity, integrate the regions. And that Secretary Rubio started with President Trump, advanced some goals to breaking as possible. Again, here are the statements in large part. We're asking that they just implement. We church in your work, and we just asking if the church groups, I read the church groups all the time, most countries, Santo, events for decades, they, you know, there's a great deal of faith in each of these countries. People really do believe in God, they believe how forgiveness and personal reconciliation and also reconciliation that's needed more than anything else. I'm wondering how we're working with them, trying to get them, the church groups, to do more. You know, I remember meeting many times with the Quick Forum from Satellite Church, and a very difficult personal relationship with the family. And Jim said that and a very meaningful time we have to pray. We may sometimes disagree, but I would say, geez, tell them there's more that can be done. And the onus is why with him and the other person, Jenny, to do more. And I'm wondering, you know, if others, Senator Rams, you know, this relationship with local government, I think the more people who are raising the issue that they listen to. Maybe they just endorse it to me every night. Maybe listen to me or hear thread in the chambers. We're not going to go away. And then they have a particular influence saying it's been not still basic in the trust of peace. It happened. I can't thank you enough for your leadership and being president. You know, and this must have been your first president. I remember arguing with the Clinton administration repeatedly about how they missed on the atrocities being committed with the genocide. And then even after it was all over, so there were people following with the push to kill them. We had very, very good witnesses come in and tell us about refugees international, for example. It's not over. They're hunting people down still. Why is Washington turning the page? So I don't think the page all returned here and the children's peace. Now we need to sustain that peace and that prosperity. So I'm wondering, you know, we know that both sides agree that the FDR is a problem, that who benefits from the status quo. Maybe we can speak to that.
And again, it's been up to the community. I remember having meetings with the council and opinion the president there. And I was at church and they had all these ideas of how they could peace and reconciliation. And they had an arm's length approach and stuff. We had with that. I said, please, Mr. President, you have an asset here in the church community. You have a second to none. They love what they call the economics and persecute them. Why would you want their offices? So I hope that that's going to be done. Very, very much bring it into that. I know you are, but whatever more can be done with that. To get more of our members of Congress who have these personal relationships with people like to do more. And so speak to that.
I think you're absolutely right. We appreciate more efforts and more in this context with diversity and we of course I think that they will play a very important role in national dialogues and there's and we important solutions and the organization we are I would say also that we started and we also I would also say to point out that FDR is so we are starting to be next time now, while FDR is a division of trust, you do not consider it to be a target beyond areas. So, this is not unusual the actual special
Thank you very much for that second.
So I appreciate that civil society is consulted on free, but I think it's really important that they are actually included in the peace process itself, and especially if the United States is making deals under the strategic partnership agreement. The free flow of the pit is not enough. Now I'd like to turn to the humanitarian crisis. In late December, the Trump administration announced a $2 billion commitment for the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, which for humanitarian operations in 17 crisis-affected countries, including DRC. Mr. Captain, given the crisis in DRC and President Trump's attention to the conflict, what portion of this budget funding will be used in DRC? It's an opportunity to discuss we were very excited about this innovative way for assistance. We think that under the ocean mechanism will be just also supported by the business that arise in the world and the industry. While the ES need to have population to which are probably and given the depth of need in DRC and other does the administration participate or foresee making additional contributions this year? I would say that the DRC strategy for assistance Okay, so I guess you will tell me that you do not currently have the details to share what specific engineering programs include funding levels are in Eastern Jersey right now. So I'll say that we, over the past year, provided a very in my state system and region yes, we measured studies and over the specific programs and elements. Okay. Thank you. And then I also wanted to turn to this meeting. I know, Johnson asked me questions, but, as you know, the Trump administration cut FY 25 funding for the peacekeeping operations by nearly 50% in two recessions packages. Because of this funding shortfall, the UN has been forced to reduce troop levels for other missions, including NORSCO, by 25%. The FY 26 funding bill recently passed to restore funding for UN peacekeeping operations. Given the importance of money flow to stability in Eastern Jersey, is the administration committed to provide full funding for the mission? Thank you so much for the chance to listen. As I mentioned, did provide many forms of speaker and full funding. We did fulfill this obligation, I believe, this past year, and certainly committed to assess the mission and sanction for every extended that something we did process. And look forward to and are you committed to making sure that NORSCO is not forced to continue operating significant capacity? We certainly remain committed to ensuring that we so we're going to start it so we're showing how we can
I was just gonna make one more comment too. I think it's important to just talk about this. I think a big winner in all of this, the entity that comes out on top is China. And I think this happens all over the world. As a matter of fact, it happens a lot in Africa. That China thrives in this environment where there's a lack of physical security and there's a lot of corruption. And I think that describes the Eastern DRC for the last few decades at least. But I think China's taking advantage of it. I think they're taking advantage of people of DRC. And I just wanted to know, are we actively engaging with President Shetty and with the other government officials in Kinshasa about the problems with the Chinese? And I would refer to it earlier down here as strategic corruption, because they will promote this instability because it keeps their competitors, Western investment out of these areas. And so until we get past some of that, I've talked to some American companies that are in the DRC subject to this, where they had regulatory burdens put on them, they had overwhelming, unreasonable taxation on their businesses, and some of it was being driven by relationships with the Chinese, with the government in Kinshasa, to promote some of that, to kind of eliminate this competition. So I think me and my colleagues here have asked, how do we get some of these Western countries, the United States, and other some of our other allies to come in and invest in the DRC and invest in become good business partners with the DRC. I think that until we address some of this stuff, it's also exceedingly difficult to do that. So have we had conversations about that?
Absolutely, we could ask you for the chance to recommend strategic partnerships. So we have to trace some of these so part of the strategic is aid to have sufficient US that have access to strategic assets in the state. So it's your organization has always to be assets and make sure those activities, also making sure there's resources, statements, there's really system, there's interruption, and certainly these trying to invest so we are looking for statements, actions, opportunities, and yes, and also to make sure actions. We need to there's also issues, ensure that it's the so all of this is
But yeah, I'm not sure to anywhere out without making point anywhere in the world for that matter, because China development programs is all over the place. But I make a point to everybody that the U.S. is a much better partner than the Chinese. We're there to if we make agreements, regarding the natural resources, we're paying for them, and we're paying appropriately for them. We're not robbing these countries of some of their natural resources, which I think is what the Chinese do. But I do think that, like I said before, I think once we get in a situation, we'll start getting some investment in there. It has to stay in Eastern New York State money. That's the vast majority of it. It has to. People that live and work there, or that would like to work there, that live there, have to see, the infrastructure building up around us, and have to see the lives getting better. Or quite honestly, it's just not gonna. It's not gonna survive long term. So with that, I get back with you. Thank you very much, Doctor. Just on that point, hearing, I've had 5 years with the issue of cobalt coming into the area. We had numerous people. They had Royce, friend and colleague, was very active in trying to come up with the idea of hey, child labor, 35,000 approximately children were being forced into these mines and dying, in some cases getting very sick, and about 200,000 adults who are very coercive, restraints by the United States Party. And then there's the global kill because of Xinjiang. I shared the China Commission, and here's there too. Xinjiang, the leaders are being so horribly repressed and oppressed, and then it comes here. Now we're going to have cars for the news global fire. But don't do it on the backs of children and forced labor. And so our bill, which again I hope is moved because of disagreement, we provide a rebuttable presumption that anything coming out of DRC that goes to China has been tainted with slave labor and child labor, and therefore is inadmissible to the United States. We got major project like in the forecast with the lease committee, but all this fails, we're right back to doing that. And we also have a strategy that bill because we want to keep them here trying to enjoy the fruits of all of that richness that they have, and let them be blessed with it. Not the Chinese Communist Party that's usually has to build out their military capabilities and to oppress. Maybe Taiwan next week we hope to and so. This is so great. This will be and we want the people here and whether it be a friendly African country or some other true democracy, that's where you do the process with safeguards, just some processing of data. You don't have to check. It just doesn't exist under the cage. So thank you for raising those kinds of important issues. I want to thank you, Secretary Chapman, for your valuable testimony, for your very clear and well-informed answers. Members of our committee, Jacobs, for asking her first questions as well. Members of the club, we may ask you additional questions for witness, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing for you. So, the rules will be respected 5 days to submit statements, questions, or response material for record, subject to the length of petition, objection, and committee space.
Donc, ils ont Thank you, sir.
You're welcome anytime. So we'll keep in touch. My name is Kalanji, and I believe I'll get in touch with you. I saw you in Charlotte, right?
Yes.
Just I have an idea. So
Yes. Yes.
thanks for the call.
Sure.
I had in mind to talk to you. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to get him? And when am I going to get it? So that was a good thing.
Oh, good. No, thank you
But
very
we'll keep in
much.
touch.
Yes, I was.
I do live in Denver, Colorado,
You do
but I just came for this hearing.
for this hearing. I see.
And
So you were, what type of, are you with the press?
I'm with the press, but normally I'm in like a medical field. No. Denver. So
You covered that Charlotte
I
conference.
did cover the Charlotte, and then I do whatever Congo stuff. I go and cover.
I see.
I help them because I think we have to tell them the truth, so they should know exactly what's going on.
Well, I thought that this hearing, has obviously, from on the audience side, it's hard to raise the consciousness of Africa with House members and senators. They're not quite as
Exactly.
because I think I mentioned during the
Mhm.
conference that most members here might be a little bit different because they're on the committee. But many members, excuse me, so
Yes, sir.
many members would not be able to locate Congo on the map.
Exactly. I know you say that.
Yes.
But that's what we're going to be doing, like awareness of Congolese people, so they
Exactly.
understand how things are working in Washington, in the world. And as I said, I'll keep in touch with you.
Yes,
And
thank
then
you.
definitely, thanks for seeing you again today.
Sure, thank you.
And
sir.
then thank you anytime, sir.
Appreciate the seat.
Appreciate.
Yes, thank you, sir.
So, tout le monde, voilà, nous sommes à la fin. Ils ont terminé. Je crois que on fera une émission ce soir certainement et je viendrai vous dire les détails de tout ce que vous avez entendu. Voilà ce que je peux dire pour l'instant et je vous reviendrai très bientôt. Merci et au revoir.
Absolutely. Very busy. Yes, sir. Yeah, one of the questions actually reflected that. Yeah. Right. Let me carry on here, okay? I have a couple people in me, you know how it goes.
So, les gens qui m'écoutent, sachez seulement que je vais revenir. Il faut que je ferme la salle parce que je devais finir avec vous et je vais vous revenir d'un moment à l'autre. Vous entendez mon son. Je suis en train de vous parler, mais acceptez que je puisse finir pour que je vous revienne par après. Ça fera 1 heure et demie avant que je vous revienne, avant que je rentre dans mon studio. Merci, au revoir.